Hey guys, John Polemy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today's Saturday, March 5th, and this is the weekly market update. As usual, and please pay attention to this, disclaimer, this is not investment advice. I am not a financial advisor. The things that we're going to discuss on here are very high risk speculations. They are not probably appropriate for most people. Please do your own due diligence. It's your money, it's your responsibility. Okay, before I get started, just a quick couple updates. Number one, yes, I'm aware that the Actionable Intelligence Alert website has a WordPress critical error. I will get to it eventually. Right now, I am just finishing up the monthly newsletter, which is going out today or yesterday. This is being recorded on Friday. And I have to do a lot of work with the videos and stuff, so it's kind of not the highest priority, but I get it. For subscribers, I will upload the back issues. People have asked me about to a drive that will have a password, and I'll put that out via email to subscribers. So you'll have access to that. So I'll get that going. Really, things have blown up so much on this newsletter business of mine. I mean, it's getting to the point of almost being unmanageable. It's really doing well. I didn't expect this thing to do like it is. I mean, obviously with the markets the way they are, the things that we've been talking about, we're in the focus, we're in the wheelhouse of what we thought was going to happen with commodities and resources. But the interest has been high, the support has been high, the business is just blowing up. So it's taking time because I have a full-time job. I typically work Monday through Saturday for 10 to 12 hours a day on construction projects. So I think we're getting to a decision point here where I'm either going to have to do this full-time or bring on some help or something. I don't know. It's getting difficult. So I'm not an IT expert. So it's going to take me some time to fix the website, but I will get to it. But, having a lot of growth and doing, good, doing well in the business is a good thing in my mind. So the other thing is many people have reached out with inquiries about support, about my family in Ukraine. Everything is fine in the city they're in. There was virtually no combat in the city. It was on the outskirts. The Russians have already moved on. The main combat forces, obviously there's interior ministry troops and small detachments in the city, but there's no like partisan activity or anything like that. I mean, it's just everything's kind of, my wife said that every day that goes by now for the last couple of days, more and more people are coming out. Stores are starting to open, but there's no resupply, right? So a lot of Red Cross handouts are happening at the central square, things like that. So food and medicine will become an issue at some point. I mean, the Ukrainian government's fighting for its life. So, our hospitals are going to be able, I mean, there's a lot of questions and uncertainty about what could happen, but we're fortunate that we feel blessed that there was no fighting in the city, unlike other places like Kharkiv and Mariupol, probably maybe Kiev are going to unfortunately have quite a bit of fighting in them, and a lot of civilians are going to be affected, displaced, killed. So it's not good. But we were fortunate. We're grateful for that. So what I wanted to talk about before I get into the slides is some people were not happy with some of my comments last week. I really can't, most people in the comments seem to get what we're trying to talk about. I'm a biased person just like everybody else. Every human being has biases, but what we need to do is fight against those biases when we're dealing with very important subject matters. Yes, if we're sitting in the sauna or at a bar and talking about, politics, it doesn't cost us anything. Everybody has an opinion. But the idea is to, when you're dealing with investing, speculating, important subjects in your life, it's appropriate to look at things with, or try to be as unbiased as possible. What do I mean? I mean, if you have a lump in your breast, you don't just say, well, I don't have cancer. That's just, benign. You go get it checked out. Okay. You get the facts, and the facts sometimes aren't what we like. And like I said, our biases sometimes cloud our views on things. That's just human nature. But as Munger says, we have to constantly wrestle and purge biases. It has no place when you're investing. I'm sorry that this happened. I'm not real happy that Ukraine got invaded. It really upset a lot of my things going on with my family. I haven't seen my wife in a year. We have other relatives that are being affected. I have investments in Ukraine that are being affected. So, the human cost in a lot of the cities, it's terrible. It's horrible. There's no good guys in this. Okay. So I'm not pro Putin. Putin, probably more than likely early in his career, had the FSB blow up 2 apartment buildings and blame it on the Chechens so he could instigate a war in Chechnya. Putin, kills journalists. Putin seeks out people around the world, like that guy in London that they injected with plutonium. I can't remember his name. It was some kind of dissident or somebody that didn't agree with the regime. But that's no different than any regime, right? MBS killing that Khashoggi guy, the U.S. Blowing families up in, the Middle Eastern countries where children are, some terrorist has his family there and they blow the whole outfit up. So it's not equivalency, but let's not pretend like, what we have done is we create these caricatures and it clouds our thinking. And I think what I'm going to get into in this video, the clouding of the thinking, the reacting, the responding to the caricature instead of what actually are the facts, is going to lead, unfortunately, I think, to a lot of pain and suffering for many people on this planet over the next couple of years. So let's get into it. So Pepe Escobar wrote an article. He's, against globalism. I'll put a link to the article, but Michael Hudson is an economist. And the gist of the article was, how Russia is going to respond to the sanctions. I mean, we see now the largest, most stringent sanctions have been put on Russia than have been put on any country in the world ever. And it's so bad. I mean, it's even affecting things. What do I mean? Like not allowing Russian athletes to participate at the Paralympics in Beijing, kicking Russian students out of the US, all these kind of things like this. It's really running hot, the emotions in the West. But when we look at the financial things, what you have to, if you come up with a caricature that you're just dealing the Russians as some kind of cartoon characters that just decided to do this and didn't think everything through, I think that as part of the battle plan, I'm quite sure they knew there was going to be sanctions. Maybe they didn't know they're going to be this great. Maybe, we don't know. Okay. And what I think though, is that the US and its European allies or partners in the EU and NATO, I don't get an idea. I don't get a view that they've thought this out. There was a lot of populism. People need to do something, people, reacting emotionally. And you have to remember something, we have elections coming up in many European countries and in the congressional elections here in November. So a lot of the political decisions that are made are decisions that are made in these so-called democracies, are made based on the election cycle. And right now you have a president in the United States that, even with polls that are favorable to him, is at 37% approval. And you have, questions about maybe a failed presidency, and people are not happy. And we haven't even got into the real pain that's going to happen. So what I would suggest to you is, as I'm going to get into this video, is Russia is not some minor player on the world stage. Yes, its economy is not that large. It's only about as large as Spain's. But you will find out that the things that we need from them in the world are key components to life for many people. And so this Pepe Escobar article goes into what are going to be some of the repercussions, or the, it's all right. We've put all these sanctions on the Russians. We've said their central bank, many banks are cut out of SWIFT now in Russia, but this is having knock-on effects that I don't think many people have considered. And it doesn't appear to me, I may be wrong, it doesn't appear to me that a lot of the leadership in the West has considered some of the knock-on and second and third level effects that are going to happen. And we're already seeing it a couple days after the sanctions went in. And we haven't even got into, as Russia now starts turning its ratchet down on some things. And we're going to get into that. But this Michael Hudson, who's kind of an anti-globalist economist. You can take that for you want, but I kind of agree with this statement. The US and Western Europe expected a happy war, uses a German term. Germany and other countries haven't begun to feel the pain of gas and mineral and food deprivation. That's going to be the real game. And that's what I want to get into this. I want to make you aware of, at least. You can come to any conclusion you would like. I'm not going to tell you what conclusion to come to. I'm going to show you the facts, and then you can decide for yourself. And then that can or cannot, in your mind, create opportunities that are already happening. So here's the facts that everybody understands. You know, here are Europe's depends on Russian natural gas. It's just that simple. The Europeans, for many reasons, and I'm not going to get into, over a couple decades now, you know, have decided that, you know, or have allowed themselves to become dependent on Russian gas for heating, for industrial. It's not just heating. People say, well, we're coming out of the winter, you know, fertilizer, urea, ammonia, furnaces in manufacturing and steel making and in glass making and all these other things that you need gas for chemical production in petrochemical plants. Look at the levels. Some of the, I mean, you have some of the smaller countries here, you know, that are 100% or close to 100%, but look at like Germany, okay, is over like almost 50%. Hungary, you know, Austria. I mean, Germany is the fourth largest economy in the world, and it has allowed itself to become dependent on Russian gas. And even these other countries, even like the UK and France, I mean, if you take 20% of the natural gas away, then what does that mean to an economy? Can you just replace it? Yes, you can go on the world market, but now you're bidding against Asia and other places, okay? There's no, you know, so it's not easy to just replace these things when we're already, see, this is the precarious nature of commodity markets that I tell people. You know, supply and demand typically, you know, are very close to matching, okay, just because of the cyclicality and the low margin business that is commodity production. So if you, I've explained this many times in the past. So if you get slightly more supply than demand, the price comes down a lot, right? Because the same, conversely, if you are a 1 or 2% supply deficit, that can make prices go up to encourage what? Demand destruction, to send messages to the market that to produce more of that commodity, and then you balance again. So if you just, for many of these countries, they've allowed themselves to become dependent, okay? And natural gas prices, you know, are very high in Europe, and it's affecting the industry. Now, as far as I know, as of the tape or time of this video, I mean, the Russians are still sending gas through Ukraine and sending gas to Europe. So that's a, if you're in a situation where you've now created somehow where you can't pay for the gas because you've shut the Russians out of the system, which they haven't fully, by the way, just certain banks were. But if you know, as Jack Nicholson said in The Departed, no ticky, no laundry. If you don't pay, they're not going to supply you with gas. And then what happens? And they could just shut the gas off tomorrow and just say, you know, this is an economic war against the Russian people, blah, blah, blah. And just, you know, and it takes time. You can't just go out there and shut the valve. So they have to slowly, Gazprom would have to shift things around, but it can be done. And I don't, has this like factored into the decisions for all these sanctions and everything? You know, we have people sitting there saying things like, and they're not serious people, I'm just talking about regular hoi polloi on Twitter, which is probably not a good thing to repeat, but, you know, well, we should pay the price, you know, for, you know, democratically elected. Okay, then go shut your gas meter off. It just has, you can take a wrench and close it. I mean, it's not what you think it is. You're talking about deprivation, okay? And I don't think people really understand what that means when you start shutting these things off. So gas is one thing. This is not something that can be solved in a month or two or even years. It would take many years of concerted policy to do this. And you still have politicians in the EU dragging their feet. It's like we've talked about before, that people still don't understand that energy security is economic and political security, right? And I don't think that many politicians still understand that. You know, we've seen some discussion in Germany about shifting back to nuclear and stuff like that, but we don't have any firm commitments. And even if you wanted to, it would take years. So this is something to consider. Who supplies Europe's oil? Let's go down the list, right? Here's Rosneft, right, from Russia. Lukoil, I mean, now you're at 20, probably 30% right there. What's the next Russian company? Gazprom. So, you know, 35, 40% of Europe's oil comes from Russia, you know, and what would that, what if you took 4% of the oil from Europe, it would be a problem. 40%. And what we're already seeing is people are the sanctions and companies are so scared. And you've already seen like Shell and some other companies divest. They're going to divest billions of dollars of investment in Russian oil fields. They're just going to walk away from these things. And, you know, the only company that's not as tall, it's a French company. The French Macron is being a little bit more mature about this, and I think sees the bigger picture. But, you know, just saying you're going to replace it from the rest of the world. Well, you see what's happening with world oil prices. You're in a situation where the Russians are still able to export gas and oil. No sanctions have been put on that. Politicians in the West are making noises about it, but shipping companies, tanker companies are scared to do it because they're scared that of the repercussions in the PR and whether their insurance companies will insure them, whether their banks will finance. So there's a lot of gray area ambiguity, so everything just stops, and that's why you see oil prices going up. So this is like self-imposed, and we're just not going to take the oil now. And so there's not even any regulations, or if there are, they're just so ambiguous that people don't know what to do. And in the meantime, you know, you're starting to see the results just after a couple days. I'm currently sitting here at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday Central Time, and I have Brent crude at 115 a barrel, up 5%. So this is going to continue until somebody, you know, wakes up and tries to give people some guidance on this or figure out what's really going on. And you know, we knew that we were already short on inventories were being drawn down, not enough investment. This is just accelerating. This war is just accelerating everything that we thought would happen over the next 2 or 3 years to right now. And this is like this is like death by cop. You know, you see this on the news. These people will be holed up. They'll like commit a crime or something, or they'll shoot somebody, and then the SWAT team comes and the person's in a house or a building. They won't come out. And they're screaming back and forth at the cops. And then they tell them to come out with their hands up. And then the person comes out, you know, guns blazing, suicide by cop, and they shoot him down. Well, that's, you know, that's what the Europeans are doing. Is this suicide by self-inflicted failure to think this thing through? And what does that mean? We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. There's so many decision paths that could happen. And I think that, you know, that might be part of the Russian plan. They might know and understand this, that they just have to wait, you know, conclude the military operation in a methodical, timely manner, which they have had setbacks, but, you know, they have taken the equivalent of land of about the equivalent same square miles of the UK. So this is a major operation. It takes more than 2 or 3 days. And so have they had setbacks? Absolutely. Have they had armor columns get blown up? Absolutely. Are they on a timeline because their population is going to, yes, yes, and yes. This can't drag out for a year. This can't drag out for 6 months. Okay. But in the meantime, you know, is that the bet that Western politicians are making? Who is more able to withstand pressure from their population for economic deprivations? Russia, which has more of an autocratic situation, or the West, which has still at least democratically elected politicians that have to respond to election cycles and populations that are not used to deprivation. So there's a lot of things in play right now. In the meantime, things keep, you know, things that we need to live keep going up in price. And the complaints are going to start pretty soon. I mean, you see the little stickers. I've seen them at several gas stations now in Houston, and even down here in the valley where I live, you know, where the gas pump total goes there, and they have a picture of a dilapidated looking Biden pointing at it's a sticker somebody put on there, and it says, "I did that." In the end, the media can blame the Russians, the media can blame whatever, but in the end, we have election cycles, and people, it's always about the economy, and people who don't want their standard of living going down, it doesn't cost a person anything to put a Ukrainian flag on their Twitter feed or whatever, or United We Stand and all this stuff. There's no cost to that. But if your standard of living is going down, if you have shortages, if you the price of food doubles and the price of gasoline's $5 or $6 a gallon, then you're paying a real price. Are you willing to pay that price for a long period of time? I would suggest people in the West, and particularly in the US, are not willing to pay the price. And I think the Russians have put that into their calculations. So let's talk about this. Here is something that really bothers me and scares me. Basically, what has occurred is you have the largest wheat exporter in the world just invaded the 5th largest wheat exporter in the world. And that's going to have unknown and possibly very, very bad effects for hundreds of millions of people around the world. So what do I mean? Here you have Russia as the top exporter in 2021, Ukraine down here. Of course, you have the United States and the European Union, Canada. And, these things are not like, you do have carryovers. I haven't had time to get into what the carryover is of the wheat stockpiles. And, Ukraine also grows other things like corn and stuff like that, seed oils like sunflower. But, I can tell you right now that the Russians are not going to be, they're going to clamp down on their exports. There will be no exports from Ukraine this year because the areas that grow the most wheat and the prime farmland is right now in the conflict zone. There's combat taking place there. So, in 30 days is when planting starts in these areas in Ukraine. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be very little exports, if any, from, not to mention the fact that with the exception of Odessa, the Russians control the entire Black Sea cities, port cities that are grain export cities like Kherson, Nikolaev. Eventually I would suspect Odessa, Mariupol, all these places are controlled by Russian forces now. And so this is a mess. Ukraine feeds a lot of people around the world, and it's not, you can just snap your fingers. This is what I keep talking about how precarious these markets can be. 1 or 2% difference, and you're talking about, major amounts of grain not being exported. So why does anybody in the US care? Well, like I said, here's if you can see, this is the wheat harvested areas, and these are some of the prime locations where combat operations are taking place. Western Ukraine doesn't have very good grain growing areas. Look at, this is the Carpathian Mountains. You're not going to grow anything, virtually anything there. And so the main areas that are in conflict are their main grain growing. So, you don't just snap your fingers and go out there and start cultivating. You have to gather your inputs. There's a supply chain that's disrupted now. Bridges and roads, infrastructure is destroyed. It's just not going to happen. And so this is a problem. So who's it going to be a problem for? Well, here's the top wheat importers. Egypt, Turkey, Nigeria, the Philippines, Morocco, depending on what chart you look at or information, but it's a lot of places that are not politically stable to begin with. I take your Wayback Machine to, I think it was 2011, when we had the what they call the Arab Spring, if you will. That was not about democracy. That was about food prices going up and subsidies being cut by the governments and the populations becoming very, very upset. And so what I'm telling you is that we are creating a situation here collectively as the world where we are going to be looking at shortages of grains. And this is going to affect a lot of people that have nothing to do with this conflict. I'm talking about people actually starving to death, literally starving to death. And it's not like the US and, right now there needs to be a major push and I'm not hearing it from anybody, to plant every acre, even marginal acre, if we can, but our supply chain is not ramped up for that either. You have to, the seed manufacturers, the fertilizer industry, they just can't ramp up. So I don't know if this has been well thought out by anybody. So here's news today. This is why I talk about that ratchet effect, that now Russia can start playing its economic cards. We played our card. Our card was to put the worst sanctions, financial nuclear weapon on the central bank of Russia and various other banks. That can't be played again. That card has been played and has sent a message to Iran, China, North Korea, India, all these other countries that, Brazil, all these countries that, if you do not get in line with the US, we will use a financial nuclear weapon on you to try to force you to do what we want you to do, which I'm not going to comment on the policy being correct or incorrect. I'm just telling you. So you get to play that card once. Now, what are you going to do? Now, all these other countries, do you think China, this is why China and Russia were de-dollarizing for the last 10 years. This is why they created a backup to SWIFT. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the same, but now don't you think that will be accelerated now? Do you think everybody that's sitting in these various capitals and these governments isn't absorbing the information and seeing what's happening? They are. And so Russia now is starting to play its cards. Russia recommends fertilizer makers to halt exports. Russian ministry cites logistics issues on fertilizers. Okay, so again, we also have shippers in the West, or people that would take these things to go to the port. I commission a ship to go to whatever Russian port. It's not a Russian ship, and the company that owns it is saying, "Wait a minute, if I go there and pick this up," I mean, there was a ship that was a product ship that was trying to offload diesel in Canada, and it was turned back. It has nowhere to go because no one will accept the cargo now, because everybody's backing up Ukraine, and we got to punish the Russians. And so where does the diesel that was going to, where does that come from? You see what the issue is here? And so we're seeing the start of this. And so here's what we see, right? Here's European fertilizer prices. You have gas prices, which are in green here, natural gas, and fertilizer prices are going parabolic. This is just happening now. The world agricultural system that supports the almost 8 billion people on this earth is a industrial level supply chain, massive system. The row crops like corn and wheat and these different things require a tremendous amount of chemical inputs into the soil in order to get the harvest that we've enjoyed. This is going to be a problem, folks. Even in the US, I think I talked about publicly buying fertilizer makers. I haven't really recommended them in the newsletter, but you can see what's happening. This is just after like a week of this. Okay, they were already up massively at the end of 2021 because of gas prices and the shortages and the things that were happening in Europe because of the self-inflicted gunshot wounds of pursuing ESG. Okay, and now you have this self-imposed, this economic war that's going on with a country that supplies people with things that they need, and you're not taking those anymore, and this is what you have. Okay, and so the price of these things can rise high enough to, there's a window to plant. It's not just, well, eventually these things will come down and we'll be fine. The grain, the harvests around the world are going to be down. I can't forecast how big this year. So you have to wait till next year to start planting again. Okay, so if the inputs get too high, the farmer says, I can't afford this. I don't see people in the West saying, farmers, we're going to subsidize you, go out and pay that fertilizer. We need those grains planted. And you have a window to plant, okay, so that the crop can grow and mature, and so you can get a harvest. I don't see anybody talking about this. This is very dangerous for many people that have nothing to do with this. Here's wheat futures making all-time highs. They spiked up. Well, the market wakes up to this. They know they're processing this information. Is this sustainable? I don't know. I mean, there's so much fog of war and chaos in the markets right now. Is this the ultimate price? Does it go up 2 or 3 times from here? I don't know. And what does that mean for everyone on Earth? Okay. And this is very dangerous. This is a very dangerous situation. And the knock-on effects have not been thought through on this. And so I tell this slide, we might actually need Russia. So here is Russia is a major supplier of key raw materials. Okay. I mean, platinum, palladium. Okay. I get that. But look at oil. Russia supplies 8% of the world's oil. Okay. You can't just replace that by snapping your fingers. Okay. That's why the oil price keeps going up. Cargoes are not moving out of Russia because people are, like I said, it's self-imposed by the West. They're just going, tanker companies are going, I don't want to, am I going to be able to offload this? What's going to happen? Who's going to insure this? Where's the trade financing? How do I get paid? Am I going to get paid? Am I going to be put on CNN as this, profiting from this? And, so everybody's just frozen. They don't know what to do. You got to freeze up in the world commodity markets. So here's gas, 6.2% of the world's gas. Nickel, 5% of the world's nickel. Remember, it only takes a little bit of a percentage on either side to have a drastic price increase or price decrease. Okay, wheat, aluminum prices are going nuts. Coal prices, met coal prices are through the roof. They're like, I think I saw seaborne met coal, $400 a ton. I mean, Peabody, a stock that we have talked about publicly, a lot of people are on, I think it's closing in on $30 or 25 or $30 a share. Copper, okay, copper's looking to break out and go, above $5 a pound. I mean, we got a big problem here. And here's the problem, folks, especially with oil. I don't know how high it can go. We're at 115 Brent right now, 120, 130, 150, $200 a barrel. At some point, that's going to cause an economic recession / depression. The precarious natures of the debt-laden Western countries, OECD countries, do not allow them to function with very, very high material inputs, the price of these materials. People, if you're spending all your money on gasoline to get back and forth to work, there's no discretionary spending going on. Your food prices are going to go up, your energy prices are going to go up. And, people in the West, especially in the United States, with all due respect, I know this is going to offend people, they never had to experience this before. And it's going to be a shock. And I cannot forecast what the political, social, and economic repercussions are going to be. And so we have this chaos going on, minute to minute almost information. For example, last night I was following this and the Russians tried to take over. They negotiated first and the Ukrainians refused to surrender basically the largest nuclear power facility in Ukraine. So there was combat on a live stream from a plant camera where everybody's watching this, 60,000 viewers. And of course, Australian uranium stocks, basically had a flash crash. And the information is like in real time. What's really going on? Luckily, we find out that these were upgraded after Fukushima. The EU had spent a lot of money making sure that the IAEA had spent a lot. International Atomic Energy Association, IAEA, spent. This has been raised up and is, this is a good design, pressurized water reactors. So we find out later that just an old training building had caught fire. It wasn't the actual plant. So, but there was this, crazy amount of misinformation that thing's going to blow up. This is going to be worse than Chernobyl, yada, yada, yada. Believe me, if the Russians wanted to destroy the plant, they could have destroyed the plant with cruise missiles. Why would they do that? Okay. But there's always this danger, right? This is what's happening in the markets. There's so much misinformation, so much fog of war, so much chaos. And, even today, uranium stocks in the West are still down. I think URNM was down like 8%. I saw, or 10% earlier. So I don't know. But talking more about uranium and how important it is, Rosatom, which is a state company in Russia that basically, is their nuclear company. It can design, build, fuel for you, run for you a nuclear reactor. They enrich 50% of the uranium to fuel grade in the world. Okay, so what's the United States? How does this work now? Okay, where, you know, just because you extract yellow cake from the ground, it has to be processed and enriched, and most of the enrichment facilities and capacity is in Russia. I hate to say this, but Marin Katusa wrote a pretty decent book about this several years ago. And I'm not a big fan of his, but he was correct on Russia and looking at how it maneuvered itself into being in these positions. And it goes back to reading, you know, people like me saying Mr. Putin, but it is what it is, like Mr. Biden, whatever. His master's degree paper about using Russia's natural resources to allow Russia to get back its respect and get back on the world stage. And now that has been in motion for 20 years. And here we are now. Okay. And the West is unprepared for any of this. There's a lot of bluffing going on by the West. I don't see how this is going to work out. In the meantime, we've got basically the commodity bull market we thought was going to happen over a period of years is happening in a couple of weeks. And I don't see leadership in the West de-escalating this or trying to, you know, or having a sense that they understand what the possible repercussions are. You can't just go and say, well, we'll get it from somewhere else. You're not going to get it from somewhere else. You're already constrained capacity-wise everywhere else for most of these things. That's the point I'm trying to make. You know, oil at $150 or $200 a barrel, $200 a barrel is, you know, $7 or $8 a gallon gasoline for regular. That will cause a very deep recession, if not depression, in the United States. That will be a problem politically and socially for the current ruling class in the United States. And you can sit here and try to game out what you think will happen, but there's no way to know. I can tell you right now, you got an election coming up in November in the House of Representatives and in the Senate and the Congress, and it's not, you know, going into that with record energy prices is not going to be a result that the Democrats are going to, you know, wish on themselves. And then what do you have? You have more bad decisions being made. We're hearing that, you know, this is already a problem. This is why I'm telling you, I mean, I don't buy into this conspiracy theory that there's these masters of the universe that are just, you know, have this master plan and it's just working like they think, and they're just, you know, Dr. Evil in the background. I mean, this is like not thought out. So now we have negotiations going on with the Iranians to cut a deal on this nuke deal as fast as we can so we can get Iranian crude back on the market to try to alleviate some of this. This is not well thought out, as I said before. Here we go. You know, nickel, you can't even see it, but it's up here at $13. It's rising so fast after these sanctions. You're at, you know, almost, I think this is record highs for nickel, at least in the last 5 years. You have basically a tripling. There went your whole ESG battery deal. Okay. You know, Norilsk nickel, which is up in the Arctic, the Soviets created an entire city based around this huge nickel resource in the north of Russia. Supplies 23% of the world's high-grade nickel. Again, you can't just go out and snap your fingers and create a nickel mine somewhere else. It will take years. So again, maybe the bet is that the sanctions on Russia are so drastic and so extreme that they will force Russia's hand before these things become detrimental to the West and the political class in the West that's making these decisions. You know, somebody asked me about carbon credits the other day. I don't really, the last show, and this is why I stay away from government, basically made up markets. This was a made up market by the government, by the EU. You had to buy carbon credits and all this. And it wasn't fantastic. Look at this. It's been a fantastic run because this was forced mandated by the EU. You had to buy carbon credits. There's a limited amount. If you can't make the changes or won't make the changes to emit more, you can buy the credits, and that's why there's a limited amount of credits. It's a supply. It's a false market, though. And look what's happened. You had the Italian. It was on Zero Hedge. The Italian Manufacturers Association there, you know, asking for relief on this stuff in the current situation. And so you've seen these carbon credits basically crash. Okay, this market's crashing now because you're going to burden the industry in the EU with these record high gas prices and then force them to do these carbon credits in addition. I mean, like I said, it's death by cop. I mean, you're coming out blazing, and I don't think it's well thought out. It's irrational and not thought out. Or maybe very well, I'm just a guy on the internet. Maybe I don't have the intelligence or the ability to see the master plan. Maybe they are thinking way ahead of me in chess. I'm not a grand master. Maybe they have it all figured out in the EU and the US leadership, but I don't think that's the case. And so, I would stay away from these carbon credits. I wouldn't mess with them. I don't like to mess around with markets that are, like I said, made up markets that the government, they're government mandated. And so, they can politically, with the stroke of a pen, be changed. And so I wouldn't mess around with this. And so what are the possible repercussions? I mean, I could sit here for, with a bottle of Jim Beam and, and for 4 hours pontificate about what could happen. We simply don't know. I mean, we're going to see in the West, are we going to see certain countries now, populous? We're already starting to see some inklings of this. I think I saw an article, are we going to see windfall profit taxes for oil companies? That's certainly going to happen, I think. Probably in the US and Canada. We've already seen the Biden administration demonize the meat industry. They're just, big meats taking advantage of the consumer, and what's going to happen when, big cereal makers, Count Chocula went up 5 times, a box of Count Chocula, we need to do it. Are there going to be price controls? I mean, this thing could really get stupid. And that's what politicians do, though, right? Because they do have to respond to the whims. They have to get reelected. Now, unless we're just going to suspend elections in the West, I haven't seen anything about that, but maybe that's where they're heading. I don't know. But this has the potential. What I'm trying to tell you is there's tremendous amount of opportunity here, but there is a lot of chaos and a lot of unknowns. This is really, really thin ice we're on. And we have to be extremely careful. That's what I wrote to the subscribers in the newsletter this month. So I'm not going to sit here and just, assume we're going to have to roll with the punches. We're going to have to see what happens and ride out the storm. When I was in the Navy, I spent a lot of time in the Gulf of Alaska at ADAC, which was, we had port operations. We had 2 tugs there. And there was only 1 Coast Guard cutter for the entire Aleutians. I think it was out of Dutch Harbor, but we used to have to go on rescue missions or pull barges, or barges would break. We had to do all this weird stuff that you don't typically do with a yard tugboat. And, I remember being in a storm one time, helping another tug, a civilian tug that had lost a barge, and we had to go out there. And we were in 40-foot seas. We couldn't do anything until the storm went by. We were in 40-foot seas, like that movie with Marky Mark and George Clooney. I mean, it got so bad that the chief of the boat that was running the boat, he's a bosun's mate chief. That's the highest ranking guy on there. He told everybody to put their survival suits on. I didn't do it because I said, if this thing goes, a survival suit's not going to do anything. And the point was, he had to go down and use the head. He's like, get on the helm and just keep this thing into the waves, power up, just don't get sideways or anything like that. And so that's what we're going to have to do, right? We're going to have to go through this storm and just keep us, going, power up in. And as the waves turn or the wind turns, we're going to have to course adjust, right? So that we don't get swamped. But I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I don't want to sound ghoulish, but, this is an investing video, and I read an investment newsletter. This is what we have to talk about. So be careful out there. There's a lot of things happening. A lot of things can happen. Will happen that we don't expect, and we're just going to have to, think quickly and move quickly. That's why I encourage you to subscribe to the newsletter. We have the Discord channel. There's a lot of great real-time information on there that's happening, a lot of analysis real quick with a lot of smart people, and we're trying to make our way through this thing. So that's it for this week. I hope this has been useful to you. Look forward to the comments. And a lot of people are emailing me. I don't have the answers. People ask me a lot. I just don't know what's going to happen. I'm in the same boat as everybody else. We're just absorbing the information that we get, trying to process it, and trying to make the correct decisions. So that's about all I can say. That may not be as soothing or what you want to hear, but that's just the facts that as they are now. But eventually, I think this will blow over. Crises do, wars do. and we'll come back to some norm. So we'll see. Maybe this will escalate into World War III, but I doubt it. But you never know, right? Stranger things can happen. I read a book about World War I and how it started, and no one really wanted to get into a world war, but somehow it happened, right? And it basically set the stage for all of these problems that we have now for the rest of the 20th century and into the 21st century. So take that as you will. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Appreciate the support. Appreciate you watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.